Hey everybody, it's Isabel from Patchwork Chicken Studio. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late. I had to deal with something. And I'm going to apologize. My cat is wandering around back here crying at me, and I'm not sure why. But anyway, she can cry. It'll be okay. I thought I'd talk tonight a little bit about quilting. So we talk about our denim hot pads, that they are quilted, and they are. But quilting is kind of a broad term, but there's actually two different things going on when you're talking about quilting for most people. And so the first thing is piecing. So piecing is where you take fabric pieces and you combine them together and stitch them together on a single piece so that you get this quilted design. And there are lots of different sort of patterns you can use to make quilts, and you've probably seen some. If you've ever been to a quilt show, my goodness, there are some amazing things that are done at a quilt show where they've pieced things together. It looks like houses or trees, animals, intricate designs of putting things together, flowers. So that piecing part has to be done before the actual quilting part. And so I do pieced quilts, pieced baby quilts. They're called, commonly called a 9-patch, so they're fairly simple. I start with squares of fabric. They're about 4.5 inches or so. And I pick 4 colors or 4 patterns of fabric that I think go together. So there's another square. And here's some that's kind of a pale pink. And what we call a tone-on-tone blue. It has a little bit of a pattern, but it's mostly blue. Anyway, I put these together. I end up with a quilt with sort of diagonal stripes of these fabrics. And so all the blues would run down, and then the pinks would run down, and then blues, and then pinks. And it's simple, it's straightforward. They're easy to put together. Not too complicated. All the pieces are cut the same size. I'm in a quilting group, a quilting Facebook group that's doing what they're calling tiny house quilting this year. And I'm not participating in the actual making of the quilt, making of the pieces. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just watching what people are doing. And so they're creating little roofs and buildings and windows, and all of these are pieced together like a puzzle to create a piece of fabric that then can be quilted. So this is the piecing part, where we put the pieces together to make a design or pattern or mix the colors. And then the quilting is the finishing. It's kind of the finishing of the part. And so we say that our denim hot pads are quilted, and they are. And I'll show you what that means. You can see the stitching on these. And this is multiple layers of fabric with some batting, and they're sandwiched together and they're quilted together, and what this does is keep them from moving around. So I do piecing, but not generally for the things that we have available in our shop. But I do some piecing on my own, obviously, and then the quilting is really kind of the important part. So I'm going to turn my camera, hopefully, so you can see my sewing machine and me working. There we go. Sorry, lots of stuff in the way. So when I am getting ready to quilt, I need 2 pieces of fabric. Can be anything. This is a piece of flannel here with some penguins on it. And then I need a top fabric. So this is underneath, and this is on the top. And I could do it the other way around. That would be okay too. Hold on, I have to turn off my furnace. Or it's going to make a noise. There we go. Okay. So then I need something to go in between. That's what gives it its thickness. So the thickness that's in my hot pads, there has to be something there. It can't just be denim in one little piece of fabric. That's not going to work. Same thing for these pieced hot pads. I need something in there, otherwise it's just 2 pieces of fabric, and it's not gonna help you any in the kitchen, that's for sure. Be nice and absorbent, but not protect your hands. So what I use is cotton batting. This is plain old cotton batting. You can use polyester. It depends on what your project is, but you need some sort of batting in there. And you can buy batting in all kinds of thicknesses. So you can get a really thick polyester batting called high loft. You can get a lower loft polyester. You can get polyester that's more thin like this, and this is cotton. When I'm working on certain projects, I choose poly, and other projects I choose cotton. It really depends on the application that you're going for afterwards. And so normally these would all be the same size, but I was in a hurry, so I cut them pretty quickly. And I think I'll just fix that here. So they're all the same size, or basically the same size. So to make it easier to demonstrate it. So I have put my back fabric pretty side down, and I've put the cotton batting on top of there. And then I'm going to put the colorful, my top, what would be my top, and I'm going to trim this one too, just a little bit. So now I have my top layer, my bottom layer, and in between is this little piece of batting here. And that's what's going to give this its thickness. And so when I quilt it, which I'm going to show you in just a second, I will have a nice sturdy thick piece that's going to be warm. So when we think about quilts, they're on beds. We have one on our, maybe on our couch that we snuggle under when we're watching Netflix or whatever. Quilts are made to keep you warm, and so 2 layers of fabric isn't going to do it. So you've got to have some batting in there. And then the quilting is the actual work of stitching this sandwich together. It's like a sandwich, right? Top fabric, bottom fabric, and batting. So stitching this sandwich together is what gives it its quilted look. And quilting can be straight lines. It can be a design. They call free motion quilting, where you just kind of turn the fabric around. You use a special foot for it. You can have a specific pattern you're going to follow. You could draw it on with a pencil or tailor's chalk, something like that, so that you would get the pattern that you're looking for. When I do the hot pads, they are just a straight line. You see that stitching there? It's just a straight line. And we do use a special foot, and it's a little bit hard to see, but this is a quilting foot, or walking foot. And walking is sort of a misconception, I think, but what it does is it puts as much pressure on top of your sandwich as the bottom of the machine does. There's these little things here called feed dogs, and that's what picks up the fabric and keeps pushing it forward through the machine so you can stitch. Otherwise, all your stitching would just stay in one place. Well, when you're doing a thicker fabric or quilted fabric, and the back and the front may not be the same type of fabric, like this is kind of slippery, if I don't have this walking foot to kind of help keep that pressure and help push that fabric through, I'll get a really bumpy kind of quilt. And I don't want a bumpy quilt, I want it to be smooth. So I have a special foot. I actually have 2 of them. I was going to show you the other one out of the box, but I don't know where it is. I must have put it with one of my machines and I can't find it right now. So I'm using a really bright yellow thread, if you can see that, a nice bright yellow thread. And I'm just going to do kind of a straight stitch. And I use a very long stitch so we can go a little quicker. And this little quilting foot makes a little bit of noise, but it shouldn't be too bad. So it makes a little groany noise. So now I've stitched one little line of quilting. So you can see it's that bright yellow. I used it on both sides. So now I've stitched my sandwich together. Now I could go free motion. And I can use free motion with this particular foot. I just have to take my time and not go too fast. But free motion basically means I lead it where I want it to go. If you've seen our denim trivets with the orange zigzag stitched in kind of funny lines, that was done free motion. So I'm going to go again, and I'm just going to turn my fabric wherever I want it to go. Do free motion quilting. And many quilters use free motion quilting as their method of choice for creating quilted materials. It's especially good with smaller quilts like baby quilts, where you can actually manage the big amount of fabric that you have. And so now you can see my little free motion. I just sort of made it up as I went. Now I could have drawn it on first and followed it using the foot of the machine, but in this case I just sort of winged it, which is what a lot of quilters do. Now if you get a large quilt that has been stitched like this with free motion quilting, it was usually done professionally by a professional free motion quilter. So they have huge machines. These quilting machines cost more than a car sometimes. I've seen some that are in the $60,000 range and some in the $1,500 range. But those are an enormous undertaking. And so when you take a quilt, let's say I made a quilt that's twin size, I'll take it to get it quilted. It might cost me $150 or $200 to get the free motion quilting done. And they have two ends and a big roller, and they roll your sandwich. You have to sandwich it before you give it to them. They roll it in there, and then they put a pattern into the electronics of the machine, which then will do the pattern, and it just runs it back and forth, this giant quilt, back and forth and back and forth, and in the end you have this free motion quilting. And they have specific patterns. There's some that are stars or flowers or swirls or whatever. So that's the difference. When I say I'm making a quilt, first I have to piece it. So first I have to piece it. I have to put the pieces together and give it whatever pattern it's going to have. And then I sandwich it and I do the actual quilting. And the actual quilting is the stitching through of all these layers. You can have a quilt that has no pieces. It's just one big piece. But the fancy is in the stitching. And believe it or not, you can stitch these by hand. Now it takes a long time. My mother made me a king-size quilt. At some point, I think I was in my 20s maybe. And she wanted to hand quilt it, and it took years. It took years to do it, and I helped. I can tell my stitches from hers too when I look at it. But you can do this by hand. And that's what quilting bees are doing. They've already got their pieces all put together. They've got that big piece of fabric ready to go. They sandwich it up and put it on a big quilt frame, and they all sit around and they stitch all this by hand in a pattern that they wanted, that they liked. So very interesting to me. I always thought quilting, before I knew about quilting was not that mysterious. It's very mysterious. And it's a lot of hard work. When you get a handmade quilt from somebody, even if it was machine quilted, but you get a handmade quilt that somebody spent the time to piece together, even if it was simple, like mine are simple, you have to understand that took a lot of time. It took a skill set that I had to learn. I didn't come by it naturally. And I had to learn all the techniques, and I had to have the right equipment. So I had to have the right kind of sewing machine. I had to have the right kind of sewing foot. These quilting walking feet can cost $20 or $30, and they don't live forever. They eventually die. So there's a lot of effort that goes into even something that looks really, really simple. And I've made larger size quilts, and I've made smaller size quilts. I do a lot of baby quilts, especially now. We seem to have a lot of pandemic babies going on. But just remember, when you get something like this, there was a lot of effort put into that. From the piecing, to the sandwiching, to the actual quilting on the machine. So I thought I'd wrap it up tonight. I think I'm staying under my 15 minutes this time, maybe. I hope so. Anyway, I hope everybody's having a good week. We're coming up on a weekend. Yay, I like weekends. Not sure what I'm going to do with mine, but I hope you got something planned. And I hope you're all taking care of yourselves, taking care of your neighbors, and taking care of your family.